Good evening and welcome to Horror Time. This is another episode of scary stories to fall asleep to. Before getting into tonight's episode, remember to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. And now, without further ado, tonight's story. Breathing by Tiny Cartographer 824 from Reddit/True Scary Stories. When I was in high school, I moved to a major city suburb. While the majority of this area was suburban in appearance, there were still some rural features. One thing I hated about this area was that it didn't have the best lighting. Street lights in my area were scarce, so it was always extremely dark at night. My house was situated at the corner of a street and an avenue. My house faced the main street, which was a few miles long and led to many neighborhoods in the area. The avenue that my house was on ran perpendicular to the main street and made up of about 6 houses. The avenue was almost entirely gravel. At the end of the avenue, the gravel ended and dense vegetation began. The dense vegetation eventually led to a state forest. At the time, I had been dating a girl that lived in the area. In order to walk to and from her house, I traveled the main street previously mentioned and walked it all the way to the end of the street. The end of the street led to a small field. Walking through the field led to a wooden fence. The wooden fence separated the backyards of multiple houses, including her house, from the field. After leaving her house one night, I realized that it was a lot later than I thought. It was after midnight and we had school the next day, so I wanted to get home and get to sleep. After she locked her fence door and went inside her house, I turned around and made my way through the field. As I mentioned previously, this area had virtually no lighting at night. For this reason, I opted to not use a sidewalk and walked in the middle of the main street. I did this mainly to monitor my surroundings. Walking in the middle of the street meant I could use the moonlight and could avoid walking extremely close to trees. At this point, I was nearing my house and was approaching the area I called the Black Hole. I called this area remaining half of a mile from my house because it was the darkest stretch of my journey home. There were no street lights and mostly trees on both sides. After entering the black hole, I began to hear a weird sound. It was too far to make out clearly, and I thought that it may have just been an animal, so I didn't think too much of it and continued walking. I could see a car approaching in the distance, so I momentarily made my way to the sidewalk, waited for the car to pass, and made my way back into the middle of the street. After maybe a minute of walking the main street, I heard the sound again. At this point, I realized the sound was getting louder, so I decided to increase my pace. As I was nearing my house, I continued listening for the sound in hopes that I could determine its origin. The longer I listened, the louder it got. Eventually, the sound was so loud that I could clearly make out a forceful inhale, exhale. I was terrified. I knew that whatever was making that sound was extremely close to me, but I decided that I would not look back until I got close enough to my house. This way I could utilize the light from the only street light in the area at the corner of my house. I could hear the inhales and exhales getting louder and louder and louder until I finally neared the street light. I eventually worked up the courage to turn around and was shocked by what I saw. When I turned around, there was a man right behind me, not on the sidewalk or on one side of the road. He was so close to me that if he had tripped, he would have knocked me over. He then abruptly moved around me and ran down the avenue that I lived on and into the darkness. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Horror Time. If you enjoyed the video, please consider leaving a like and subscribing for more videos. Have a great evening, stay safe, and good night.